Welcome back to Investing and Trading Live. As always, I am your host, Josh Locust, with my good friend and my good pal, my tag team partner, Mr. Al Connickson. On the last segment, we covered some different topics. Obviously, there was earnings going on. We'll talk a little bit more about earnings on this segment here, but being able to identify and differentiate having a strategy in the financial markets, whether it's stocks or options or futures or Forex, the difference between having a strategy and gambling. There's two totally different approaches to the markets, and hopefully we can inspire you to learn those different techniques and those strategies to get started. We actually have an introductory investing class that allows people to see how to have an actual strategy with the stock market, how to get started with low risk, high reward, and adding odds and probabilities into your strategy. That way you can be comfortable and also confident getting into the stock market. Simply to come into one of these investing classes, by the way, they're free. We have them all across the metro. Just text the word investing to the number 210-210. I want to make sure our listeners understand this. We are a local academy that trains people just like you how to trade and invest. So to come into one of these classes, just text the word investing to the number 210-210. That's one for you and one for a friend. When you text that in, you're going to get a message right back, and there's going to be a link to our landing page, and that'll allow you to pick your own date and time. We have these throughout the week, on the weekends, so anybody can attend. They're about 2 hours long. Al teaches these, and I teach these as well. We have a good time talking about the stock market. So Al, as earnings went through this week, obviously we talked about a couple earlier. Obviously, we haven't spoke about Google yet. Google actually had great earnings, and the price went up about 10%. With the close on Wednesday was around 159, opened up right around 175 or almost 176 bucks per share. It was about almost around 10%. Now that's interesting because good earnings, price went up. Intel, they also had good earnings. So you look at the Intel price chart, they had good earnings. Just to note, it was their earnings were up 31%. The downfall is their revenue was down 0.77%. So it doesn't seem like a lot. But that being said, price cratered about 10%. So it went from the closing price on Thursday at about 35 bucks per share, opening up right around 31 or so. So good earnings doesn't always mean good stock price. Bad earnings does not always mean bad stock price.
Right.
So that's why we do need a plan, but also to be able to practice that plan. We had the NFL draft, obviously this weekend going on, starting on Thursday. And obviously the good old Minnesota Vikings picked J.J. McCarthy. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that is cool about this process with sports is very similar to the stock market, because athletes don't just go get drafted and then just go sit on their couch and drink beer and smoke cigarettes and play video games until their first week.
That was my mistake.
That was your mistake, huh? Well, I can tell. It looks that way. That was actually a compliment because
I appreciate that.
So with that being said, when you're going through, they're practicing between now and their first game. They're practicing their craft. They're getting in there and they're following a plan. They have a workout plan, trying to get in shape, game shape to when week 1 happens, and they're following a strategy, a scheme with the team. Here's what we're doing. Here's why we're doing it, and they're gonna practice that all the way until first game for the first game of the year. That's the same thing we train and teach here at the Academy, is having a strategy. First off, understanding that you can have a strategy, following that strategy, and then practicing before you put your hard-earned money into the market. Why is that so important to be able to practice before you put your hard-earned money in the market?
Well, what we want to do is have you practice a lot so you get used to the fact that things are going to be not always the same. You're not going to make every trade and investment with the same outcome. It's going to be different. And there are different things that happen. You mentioned all sorts of things there, and I...
Can you keep up with me? Can you keep up?
I tried to jot down notes, but there's so many different things I could comment on. Let me first of all comment on the earnings thing. You mentioned earnings and why some companies with good earnings seem to go up, some with good earnings go down, some with bad earnings go up. And there's different components to an earnings report. So you can spend a lot of time trying to analyze that and figure out what's going to happen, basically making a guess as to what's going to happen. Or again, you can do what we do. We don't trade based on the news. We trade based on facts and
or the
facts,
clues.
the clues and the facts, right? So it's better to understand what the institutions are going to do, because the people that are really moving the market, they don't necessarily trade on the same news that we do. They have access to things that we don't have access to as far as information and news on these companies. So would you be better off, guessing at what's going to happen based on what you hear on the news, or make your trades based on what the institutions that might have additional income are doing?
Yeah, it's not about what you feel, it's actually what you see on a price chart.
Exactly. And then you mentioned sports. You brought up football. And every team, in order to have an opportunity to win, has to play both offense and defense. Mm-hmm. And in same thing in trading and investing. You don't just put money into something and then it's always going to be a winner for you. You have to be able to be defensive. In other words, protect your assets. And you mentioned a plan. Each team has a plan that they go into a game with. It's not the same plan from game to game, because different teams are different and require a different plan.
Mm-hmm. That being said, the institutions know what the public is typically doing, so you need a strategy that's designed to trade like them and not against them.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because a lot of people look at all of these technical indicators that are out there, and you can go to the library or go to YouTube, and you're going to find all sorts of strategies based on these different technical indicators. Mm-hmm. Here's the truth, folks. Wall Street, the big players, they know how the public reacts to all of those technical indicators. Mm-hmm. And they can often use that against you, because what they need to do really is, what they do is play on your emotions, play on the emotions of the public. And we talked about emotions before, how fear and greed drive us as human beings. That has always been the case with human beings. That always will be the case with human beings. So it becomes very important, and this is part of a plan, to control those emotions. The only way you can do that is to basically take as much as possible your brain and your gut out of your decision-making process. You do that by following a set of rules, a step-by-step process based on a set of rules that does that. And those rules are based on following what is factually available on a price chart given to us by the institutions. And they try to hide what they're doing. So you have to use a strategy that has been developed and fine-tuned to be able to find what they're doing, even though they're trying to hide it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, here's an example. You mentioned something very interesting about the institutions knowing what the public is going to do. It's actually pretty simple. And let's do a little case study here. And I'll even do a case study with you, Al.
Oh, okay.
And just so everybody knows, we did not talk about this prior to this. Now...
And you have me a little worried.
And I'm hoping this works out on live radio and podcasts here. But I'm going to ask my listeners to give me a number between 1 and 100. Okay, I want to have you give me a number between 1 and 100. So I want you to think about that. And I want you to do the same thing. Before I ask you, Al, just let our listeners think of that number between 1 and 100. And Al, why don't you give your number?
The number is what? Based on what?
What I'm going to do is I'm going to predict what the majority of the people listening are probably going to say.
Okay.
So why don't you give me an actual number between 1 and 100?
Okay.
Okay. Think about that for a second. I'm going to wait to ask you. I'm going to guess, just based off the psychology of people, the majority of you listening right now, that number is a whole number.
That would be probably 99.99%.
Correct. So that's just a simple psychological part of the stock market. Mm-hmm. Now, if you picked a whole number there, and I predicted that, it might be advantageous to understand why institutions know what people are doing. It's not like they're what's the word? Magicians or psychiatric people. They can read your mind.
No, not psychiatric.
Well, whatever. You know what I'm talking about. So it's not like they can read people's minds, but they know just based off of psychology, just the general psychology of people. Now, that was a simple example. Now, if you had a strategy that was designed to follow them and not try to trade against them, wouldn't that help you? That might be a total different ballgame. And we talk about that strategy. We show you what that strategy is that's designed to follow the institutions. Everybody knows, you got to follow the big money. Well, obviously that's true, but how do you do that? We're going to show you that in these investing classes. They're about 2 hours long to show you how the institutions are buying and selling. That way we can trade like them and invest like them, not against them. Text the word investing to the number 210-210 for one of these investing classes in the metro area. We have our state-of-the-art facility right here in Bloomington, but we're all across the metro, going to different locations, into your backyard so you can get started with the stock market. Simply just text the word investing to the number 210-210 for 2 seats for an investing class near you. Alec, we have a lot more to cover. We have one more segment to go on the show, and I think we got some good stuff here coming up for our listeners. So stay tuned. This is Josh and Al. We will be right back.